Hi everybody, this is Anne. So you've spent a lot of time throwing some pottery and it's time to make decisions about how you'll decorate it. When there are endless choices to ponder, it can be very overwhelming to choose. As potters, we're looking for something that's simple to execute, looks professional, and doesn't cost a lot of money. In this video, I'll demonstrate several cool ways to decorate your pottery that fit all these criteria using a simple item we have around the house, round measuring spoons. In our 5-foot ideas for pottery video, I demonstrated how to make these petal-shaped feet on the bottom of my cup using one of my kitchen measuring spoons. I was surprised at how much positive feedback you guys gave me. Since that was a big hit, I thought it'd be fun to expand on that idea with other ways to use the spoons. The first design uses the half-circle spoon forms in a simple pattern all over the pot. I started with a vase that I threw on the wheel and let dry to leather hard. I want to divide the pot into 12 vertical sections by using my trimming spinner, but it doesn't have that many markings, so I'll divide it into 6 first by marking all the red-colored lines. Once the rim of my pot was marked, then Xiem set up the laser level for me so that I could continue drawing those marks down to the bottom of the pot. Once I had the 6 divisions, I divided each of those 6 lines for a total of 12 vertical division lines. I also wanted to create horizontal divisions. I used a measuring tape to divide the pot every 1 inch all the way to the bottom. By steadying my pencil against an L-shaped ruler on my table, I was able to turn my banding wheel and mark each division line. For this design, I don't need all those lines visible, I just needed to see the intersections, so it was easiest to erase all the unnecessary division lines now. To do this, I simply used a damp sponge or wet finger and wiped over the pencil mark. For the decorations, I used the 1/8 teaspoon. I placed a piece of plastic wrap over the spoon, then placed a ball of soft clay into that. I turned the spoon over on top of the plastic wrap. While pushing down on the top of it with one hand, I used my other hand to crank the handle back and forth. This cut the excess clay away from the spoon part. Now when I took it away from the plastic, I got this cute little button of clay. I placed this over the first division mark and traced around it. I scored and slipped it into place, then used a wet paintbrush to seal the seam to the pot. I continued to place more buttons over each crosshair of the pot. You can leave the button plain, but I used an empty pin barrel to create a small circular impression on it. Here's one I made earlier with all the buttons in place. The particular shape I threw makes this look like perhaps a cactus or maybe a pineapple. I glazed this with the Amico Smoke Celadon all over but the centers, which I glazed with my white liner glaze. These remind me of antique hobnail glass designs, but also I can't help but think of these protuberances as eyes. A little freaky, really. Next, I'm going to carve into those half-circular forms and position them to highlight the rim of the pot. Again, I threw this squatty vase form and let it dry to leather hard. For this one design, I used a 1/2 teaspoon. Again, I repeated the steps to create those bigger circular forms. I made enough buttons to completely encircle the rim. How many will depend on how big your opening is. I began scoring and slipping them into place next to each other using the same steps as the first project. When the buttons were leather hard, I drew a swirl on the surface of each dot, starting from the center and working outward. Using my diamond core fine tip carver, I carved into each swirled line. I used a damp sponge to soften the sharp carved edges. I used a paintbrush to get into the tight crevices and get rid of any smuts. To get rid of any sponge or brush marks, I wet my finger and lightly went over the top. I want to create stems. I could roll coils for this, but I have a hand extruder that can make more consistent coils. I loaded a single-hole die into one end and a roll of clay into the barrel, then simply turned the crank. I wet the pot where I wanted the stem to be, then attached it in place. I used a wet paintbrush to seal both sides of the stem to the pot. I filled this icing bottle with slip and trailed little dots between each stem along the bottom section of the pot. Here's one I made earlier. They almost look like chocolate cherry cordials to me. I actually made this pot with a lid. To further the floral theme of the pot, I used a silicone rose candy mold and created little rose flowers. I attached them to the lid. On the lid pull, I added one more carved circle and slip dotted around it to match the body design. I glazed this with Amico Celadon Cherry Blossom to all the flowers and then glazed the rest of the piece with my white liner glaze for this very feminine piece. It would be lovely with some potpourri in it or some bath salts. Finally, I thought it'd be fun to use a circular spoon forms to create imagery like a dragonfly, bee, or a ladybug. Here's a round vase form that I threw and now is leather hard. To prepare the background surface for my bugs, I thought I'd carve some simple leaf shapes. I freeformed the design on the pot using a pencil. I carved along each pencil line using that same fine-tipped carving tool. For the center of each leaf, I used straight horizontal lined patterns, starting in the center and working my way across on each side. I continued this all the way around the pot. There it is, all ready for the bugs. For the dragonfly, I began with the 1 tablespoon and created 2 of the half-circle forms using the same steps as the other designs. I also created 1 half tablespoon, 1 half teaspoon, and 1 1/4 teaspoon. The largest buttons will be the wings. I used a little printer's roller to flatten them out. I just slowly worked each clay circle flat so that both of them are the same size and shape. I folded them on top of each other and cut a notch from the end of one side so it gives an illusion of the dragonfly having 4 wings. I also rounded those sharp corners. I began to put the dragonfly together. With the wings on each side, the head goes over the top, then the next smallest circle is where the wings will attach. The smallest circle will be under that. I use the extruder with a little bigger die hole for the body. I sectioned off the coil into thirds, then added a little ball of clay in between those. I just needed to decide where I want to place the dragonfly over my carved leaves. I'm just lightly sticking them in place until I get the right placement for them. When you have it figured out, just score and slip them into place. You should let this dry to leather hard, but since mine's not there yet, I'll just draw on the lines to show you how I'll carve it later when it's stiffer. I'm simply drawing lines to give the illusion of the eyes, body, and wing lines. Here's one I made earlier with a smaller set of measuring spoons. I got a bit elaborate with my line work on the wings. On the back of the globe, I used the 1/8 teaspoon and the impressions of the blunt end of a bamboo skewer to create the ladybug. I used 2 of the 1/8 teaspoons to create the body of this bee. I then added a ball of clay for the head and flattened balls of clay for the wings, which I then carved simple lines into. I was excited to fire this one. I used Amico True Celadon to glaze the body of this piece. I wiped back the glaze from all the insects to reveal the clay and highlight each one as they buzzed around the leaves. Simple, but effective. These are but 4 ways you can use simple round measuring spoons to make elaborate pottery designs. I would love to hear your ideas about other ways to use the spoons. Thanks to the newest members of our Little Street Pottery Research Facility team. If you'd like to join the team and earn a title, click on the Super Thanks button or the link to buy me a coffee. It also really helps us out if you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. See you next time in the studio.